Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. You man, Diamond K in here, of course. I am excited to have this conversation today. So many things going on in the world, but we're gonna focus. We're gonna hyper focus on Baltimore. So much going on in Maryland. I am pleased to have on the line brother Daren Muhammed. And you are the host, of course, of State of the City,
Yes, sir.
and you are a political commentator, definitely.
Yes.
Um, I think you're an activist as well.
Yes, sir. Often
You know,
imitated, never ever duplicated. Yes, sir.
absolutely, absolutely. So, we're going to talk about this 2022 primary. And but we talk about Wes Moore and whatever else you want to talk about. But
Okay.
It's been a while since we had a chance to chop it up. So what's been going on with you?
Well, brother, first, let me thank you and thank your family just for your friendship, for our relationship, for being able to have these conversations that we've been able to have. I got to thank you. I got to thank your family. I got to thank, of course, your extended family in terms of your producers and all of those that have helped to make Radio on Fire possible through the years. So just thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for just being here. And it shows like this, in terms of independent media, that's going to really make the changes in these prospective cities, the states, the country, and on the planet right now. So just thank you for this format and just continuing to be here and be consistent and persistent with providing this platform and with this format. So I can't start without first saying thank you, my brother.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Now, as it relates to, I think, your question of what's been going on, what's been happening for me personally, just in terms of, again, the elevation, still the work that we have to do in Baltimore City, because as we always say, we've heard the old saying, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But we like to bring it to Baltimore and say, no, if you can make it in Baltimore, you can make it anywhere. Baltimore it's not just a tough cookie coming out of my experience in the Nation of Islam. We say it's a tough bean pie, but there's a lot of ingredients and mixtures that go into making a nice bean pie. So that's important, that if you can make it in Baltimore, with the various different communities, of course, the schools, the institutions, of course, our colleges, the hospitals, the town, and of course, being able to navigate the terrain in Baltimore from the different perspectives, the different parts of town as well, and still keep your sanity and your humanity. That's the other part when we talk about the politics and the politics that go on in Baltimore as well. Especially during election time and election season, but just your every day-to-day vicissitudes of life that our people have to go through, to be able to I think, one, understand our role as Black men, our roles as Black fathers, our roles in terms of again, teachers, our role as elders for any of us that have been honored to be the age of 50 or older, which I am. So I've been honored. I'm coming up on a birthday in a few days in which I'll be 56 years old. So that's an honor. And now to have, of course, children, 4 girls, 1 boy. My oldest, who's celebrating a birthday tomorrow with the great Malcolm X, our great El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, whose birthday, May the 19th. We will be stopping to honor him tomorrow. My firstborn, Queen Adriana, celebrates a birthday with Malcolm X tomorrow. So Baba Malcolm X, and of course our ancestor in that ancestral realm. So that's an honor. And she, of course, honored me with having my first grandson, little Aston St. John, who will be 3 years old in August. So wow. I've had, I guess, many roles to play in terms of being a father, and of course an uncle as well, of course, to my countless nephews and nieces and great nephews and nieces. And I think I got a couple of great, so I can't get any greater than this right now, So I'm honored, just to be able to see where God has blessed me to be in terms of my personal life, in terms of my professional life, but also in terms of just still being here through all that our people have endured, through our sojourn of being here in America, but our sojourn of being here in Maryland, one of the first 13 states and colonies that our parents were and great ancestors were brought to. So honored to be here, making it through that, because 1619 in 2019, some say 400 years later, right? So it's interesting you have this term COVID-19. I don't know if we won't have to get into that tonight, but maybe another day we can really come back and talk about that. I don't think that's a coincidence that you have that number 19 in there. But nevertheless, just through these last 2.5 years, since the pandemic, scamdemic, transdemic, I always say we're still here, we're still clear, we're still sincere, and living our lives without no fear. And that's very important. And at the root of that, as one of my great teachers, of course, and you always were able to see and hear my numerous interviews with the late and sage for all age, Baba D. Gregory, always said, it's one thing to be loving, but can you be lovable? So I think that what has allowed me to endure personally and allowed us to endure really is our love. And that's going to be key for what of course remains to get us to the next level in America, but also in terms of what's taking place globally inside of America and outside of America.
Absolutely. And so, you know, for the last few years, I have been in Atlanta and I have been in Dallas working with different candidates and working on some media things. But I really feel that the time is now that I have to come back to Baltimore and reestablish some things. And so we have transitioned from Radio on Fire now to On Fire TV.
Okay.
And so we're going to be, thank you. And we're going to be doing, some expansion in that regard. And so I'm definitely going to be talking to you about some things. But, when we talk about candidates and, I was familiar with Wes Moore before he announced his candidacy, but I guess around the time he was doing exploratory, and I think he may have toyed with running for mayor at during the last election,
right?
But I saw, I guess, when he was exploring running for governor, and I'm reading up on him and looking at some of his interviews. I read his book, and I thought, of course, you take something that's surface. And I thought, this sounds like a good story.
Yes.
This sounds like somebody that I could get behind.
Yes,
and
sir.
But I'm gonna tell you the funny thing. The first person that I mentioned this to when I was watching him was my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother said, I don't know about him. Right. And so she said it to me a couple years ago.
Right.
And
mother's
I said,
intuition. Mother's intuition.
Why? You know what I mean? And so she said, I don't know where I really don't know where he stands. You know what I mean? Right. So she says, I can't really pinpoint where he's coming from, and that stuck in my mind. And then of course he's as you run a race, things are gonna come up.
That's
people are going, gonna have opposition research, you're gonna have people throwing stuff at you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some dossier floating around that I happened to see. And so what are your thoughts on candidate Wes Moore as a person, the whole thing?
Right. Well, as it relates to Wes Moore as a person, I don't know him. I've never met him. Been in the same room with him where I may have been at some event and he maybe came through, but we've never met. But I know of him through, of course, this book, The Other Wes Moore. In terms of his work, I don't know of the work that he's done in Baltimore City. I've heard him talk about work that they've done in Baltimore City. There's a lot of people since the 2015 Freddie Gray, what many call the riots, the rebellions, the uprising. There were a lot of people that I thought were sent into Baltimore prior to that. And as a lifelong activist, I've been an activist in Baltimore City since the 80s and the late 80s, early 90s, of course. And then growing up in Baltimore, because as you know, Baltimore, it's all about, what high school you went to, right? So for those that know me, they know I went to Dunbar, right? So those that know you know which high school you went to, which was Evanston. So that's how Baltimore, that it's like in most cities, but particularly in Baltimore City, it's all about what high school you went to.
Very true. Where did you grow up? What neighborhood? Where
you grew up in? I grew up in the 1700 block of McCullough Street. The corner store was Herb Johnson Grocery Store. Mr. Herb and his beautiful wife, Miss Puddin, had two sons, Joey and Eddie, or Joey and I think it was Joey and Thomas, right? And then down on the other corner was on Mr. Pete, and his son Tony had a little store on the corner where we would go as well. And they had the marble floors, they had the marble countertop, they had the nice little bar stools you could sit on. So you remember all of those things, but that's part of our childhood. We remember the elementary school we went to. We remember the recreation centers when we first got involved in we call it the rec life, right? Which of course was a part of the extension of our lives. So all of that was part of our growth and our upbringing. When this person, Wes Moore, was brought to my attention, pardon me, it was by another brother who has been doing radio for years, who I went to Dunbar High School with, which was Donnie Glover. So Donnie Glover had asked me he said, do you know about this guy, Wes Moore? And I said, which Wes Moore are you referencing? I said, are you talking about my nephew? He said, no, it's a guy who wrote a book, The Other Wes Moore. So I said, well, I don't know that Wes Moore. And is there anything, can you tell me anything about this Wes Moore? So Donnie couldn't say, he's somebody who's been doing radio for years. So he couldn't say, well, he went to so-and-so high school. He grew up so-and-so. He went to so-and-so church, because that's the other part of Baltimore. It's all about the churches or your religious institutions as well, right? So Donnie couldn't put the meat on the bone. So that right there to me was already a red flag that was some things that didn't add up about this guy calling himself the other Wes Moore, So Donnie never said, well, let me link you up with him. He never said, let me bring you on the radio show and I'm going to have him on, right? So that we could have some conversation. Ain't necessarily had to be confrontation, but in that conversation, people will tell you who they are based on the information that they share. If we got that third eye open or we just listening attentively, then a person will tell you what you really need to know or to hear about them. So this could have been, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This could have been nipped in the bud, years ago, when whoever his architects were, whoever his handlers were, whoever the publishers were, or those who were his researchers said that we want to do this book and we're going to entitle it The Other Wes Moore. Now hold that for a second, and I'm going to come to you and share with you. Well, I'll let you. I'll pause right there. But to ask in terms of what did I know about him, I knew nothing about him. Still don't know much about him, other than what I've seen in the news media of him saying he, initially he said he grew up in Baltimore, which we're gonna get into, right? Then said he went to Johns Hopkins and said he was a Rhodes Scholar, which again raises flags in a time of everybody talking about being awoke and being awake. Why would any self-respecting black man, right? When everybody talk about Black Lives Matters, you say, wait a minute, they didn't get that memo in Africa with all them Africans that Cecil Rhodes killed. When you know the history of Cecil Rhodes, what self-respecting black man or woman would want to be a Rhodes Scholar, right? And while you taking down statues, how come nobody ever said we got to take down the statue of Cecil Rhodes? How come nobody's ever said let's take down the statue of John Hopkins, who owned slaves himself? And there was the movement when Kathy Pugh was the mayor here in Baltimore, right in Wyman Park. They took down the daughter of the Confederate statue that's in Wyman Park. But if you just go a half block up the street, the bust of John Hopkins is sitting right there at the campus of John Hopkins. And Wes Moore never stood up and said, let's take that down. No one else who's running for mayor has said, let's take that statue of John Hopkins down. In fact, let's take that name, John Hopkins, off the hospital and off the colleges. So, you can't be selective in what races you want to confront and talk about taking down their statues. And if you are, then you really are not a real activist, because you're not trying to bring about universal change and universal correction. It could be something else that you're really trying to push on the people.
So with regards to the removal of statues, right. Do you think that that's something that should happen as far as that? That whole movement?
Initially, I think any statue should come down. The real statues we should be addressing are the statues that's on the books, because ain't nobody ever been hung by a statue. Nobody ever been killed by a statue unless somebody chipped away a piece of stone of a statue and hit somebody upside the head with the statue. But the statues that we should be addressing are the statues that's on the books in your local cities and your states, and
of course the statues,
those are statues.
But I mean, right? from the standpoint, in the I guess about 100 years ago, there was this movement where the white people in this country wanted to raise up and honor some of their past heroes.
Right?
And you
Their
had this
founding
whole
fathers,
right. You had this whole time where all these statues were erected,
Yes.
and these statues are steeped in white supremacy,
Yes.
and they are, and often times people don't even know who this person is. You know,
Correct.
they may be in a black community, and
Correct.
folks don't even know who this
Yep.
is. Just
Yep.
you know, this is just something that the birds are crapping on, and people
Right.
sitting there
Right.
drink on while they sitting there talking, and don't even know
the history. Yeah, blacks don't know the history.
Right. So
that's because they didn't teach us that in many of our schools,
right.
but also our institutions, and of course, just placing a plaque next to that statue to give the true history of that individual. Right. You would think that you would have those to say, well, if don't take down the person's statue, but give the whole story about who this man or this woman is that you've decided to erect a statue of them. So that's one of the things that could have been addressed. But, you know, if you start saying what statues you're going to take down, then you can't be selective in which ones you want to take down. Don't leave Albert Pike, the founder of the Golden Knights of the Golden Circle or the Ku Klux Klan.
No.
You leave him out of the conversation, right? But then you want to take down, you know, Nathan Bedford or Nathan Forrester. Or you want to take his down. Or you want to take down Lee. You say, well, wait a minute. You know, don't be selective in which ones you want to take down. You know, and I think, of course, there was other reasons behind a lot of what they were doing with that. But as I said, it was focusing your attention, I think, on the minimum on the micro as opposed to looking to the macro.
Right. But see that you know, and that's where, you know, progressive thinkers are, right? So it's just like you do have to have that starting point, and then I think you got to continue. But what happens is that we'll go there, and then it'll fall off, and then they'll stop with that, and they ain't even finished the job, and then they go on to something else. And so, but no, you're right. I agree with that, and definitely, you know, I've listened to a lot of interviews of Wes Moore, and even with regards to the name of the book, he didn't want to name the book The Other Wes Moore.
Right.
The title was selected by the publishers.
Yeah, well, then the publishers will be held accountable for that.
Yeah, and
eventually we'll seek some legal counsel, because again, when we look at this other Wes Moore, as I shared with you, the other Wes Moore that he's referencing in the book is my nephew, and I'll show you a picture of a family picture of myself and my nephews quickly. And this is, of course, me. I was probably about 20 years old in this picture, so don't laugh when you see it. But I'll show you a picture that was taken years ago. Can you see that?
Yes.
You see me holding not the little boy that I'm holding. That's my nephew George right there. But if I peel all the way to the other side, right? See the boy on the end right there standing up with the tie on?
Yep.
That's my nephew Wes Moore right there.
Okay, so this is the other Wes Moore
who's in prison. Right.
Who's in prison.
Who's in prison. That's him right there, the last one on the end.
Yeah.
Okay. That's his mother sitting there with the red dress on. Mary Moore, my older sister.
Good looking family right here.
Yep. That's me and my 5 sisters and my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at that time. 6 nephews. I got a host of nieces and nephews, you know. So, but that was my nephew, Wes Moore, and his brother, who wasn't in the picture, who was his older brother, Richard Antonio Moore. They were involved in a robbery that took place in February of 2000 at the Brown's Jewelry Store in Pikesville. And 2 other individuals were with them and taking whatever they took out of the store and leaving a Baltimore County police officer who was off duty but was moonlighting there doing security. And he pursued them outside, and they said that he had fired at them, and they, of course, returned fire, and he was struck twice. And I think he died, you know, within an hour or 2 from his injuries. They were on the run. The other 2 suspects that were with my nephews, I think they were caught within a day or 2. And my nephews were on the run. And when they caught them, they were in Philadelphia at my uncle's home, David Ebron, Ebron, is where they were. And what saved my uncle is that one of my sisters that's in the picture had sent a letter and had called my uncle and said that they could be headed that way. When this happened in February of 2000, I was living in Delaware at that time because I was sent to Delaware by Minister Farrakhan to be the student study group coordinator over the Nation of Islam in Wilmington, Delaware. And I was there in Delaware, and she called me. And of course, I said it was unfortunate that they participated in any robbery. And when this occurred, they were not teenagers. They were 29 and 23 years old when this occurred. So I said, surely they wouldn't, think of coming to me thinking that I would, provide any type of refuge for them, because that's not the way I was raised by my parents, by my grandmother, and of course by my sister. When my mother died at 7 years old, my sister Mary was she moved to Cherry Hill, but she helped to raise me at 7 years old, as I had 5 sisters, countless aunts, uncles, and of course cousins, and my grandmother who came up from North Carolina to help keep the family together. So I always, of course, have a deep love for my sister, because I was like an older son to her, being that I was just a few years older than her sons. And she never had any problems with me when I lived with her in Cherry Hill. I think the only problem she ever had was maybe me playing cutting out of school early one day to go take my girlfriend at that time to a movie. That was it. But she'll tell you that, I was a student athlete, playing football and basketball. I was working also. I worked from the time my mother died. It was as if the umbilical cord had been completely cut and severed, because I always worked at 7 years old, from a paper route to selling the News American, to selling the Afro. I remember as a little boy being able, you could get on the bus and ride downtown wherever you had to ride, as long as you were selling the newspaper and you had the newspaper under your arm. So that was just work ethics that was put in me, and put in my nephews as well, But again, as I said, the decision that they decided to do in participating in a robbery was when they were adults, not children. But my sister and my family, of course, had to bear the brunt of that, because while the task force was looking for my nephew, then many of my family couldn't get, a good night's rest or sleep, because they were constantly being harassed by the police, by FBI, because, of course, they were targeted for being part of a killing of a Baltimore County police officer, and Sergeant Bruce Prothero. So there was, constant knocks at the doors, late night hours, early morning hours. So all of that was to see if they could rattle a family member to come forward and say, okay, we have them, we're hiding them out. But it did not happen that way. And of course, then, when this book came out, Wes Moore, he didn't talk to my 5 sisters. He didn't talk to my brothers. I have 2 brothers, and he sure didn't talk to me. Wes Moore and his handlers and the publishers, they went into prison, talked to my nephew Wesley in prison, and they talked to his mother, Mary Moore, my oldest sister, and one of my other sisters, Kathy Denise. They spoke to Kathy. I talked to her, and she said she spoke to him probably about 20 minutes, 2 times for 20 minutes. But they didn't sign any release authorization for him to put our family's business in that book. When he talks about my father, he talks about my mother dying due to kidney disease, but that wasn't any again permission that he received from all of the family to go forward and write that. So it's a lot of things that he embellished in that book to basically promote himself, and I thought that's what the book was, to promote Wes Moore, to say, I'm the good Wes Moore, this is the bad Wes Moore. Wes Moore.
That is definitely how it was framed.
Right.
But I mean, and I'm not his attorney,
Right.
but
No.
but in order for him to have some of this information that he included in the book, he had to have, like you said, spoke to a family member to get some of the information.
Right.
And so your nephew, according to the candidate Wes Moore,
Right.
your nephew and him developed a friendship, and had some correspondence and some kind of communication, and
Right.
it seems like a great story. Like, I could see how you could be inspired to feel like, okay, like, wow, like, one wrong step and this young man, young adult, is in jail for the rest of his life. And I could have gone down a wrong path, but for whatever reason, I didn't go down that path. But I could have easily been in his position and he in mine. Right. And so, and I think that's what he was trying to say.
Right. But it was, but it was all based on a lie, because the book starts off, when you read it, says, here's a story of two boys that grew up blocks apart in Baltimore. Yes. Right. So
it forward, it says it in the forward.
Yeah, it starts that way, right?
That's two boys the narrative right there.
Right, now, let me let you in on a little of my history, right? I wasn't always Daren Muhammed, right? People that know me as Daren Ebron, growing up in Baltimore City. But there's another guy by the name of Daren Ebron that grew up in Baltimore also, right? He's done radio. He's been a disc jockey. He's done parties, right? But he's used a lot of people, because I know a lot of people. I saw him in the paper. He got arrested for bringing drugs off, I think in California, but I've never decided to say I'm gonna write a book and say the other Daren Ebron and use his demise for my rise, right? But at least he was born in Baltimore. But Wes Moore wasn't born in Baltimore. So he allowed this lie. Not only did he allow this lie, his mom allowed the lie to be told. His handlers allowed the lie to be told, where he said for years he was from Baltimore. He was born and raised in Baltimore. It wasn't now until this 2022 gubernatorial campaign came up, and when this dossier was released, and the dossier raised questions about the validity of whether Wes Moore was born in Baltimore or not. Now, some people would say, what difference does it make? And if you listen to my numerous interviews with Bobby D. Gregory, we talked about the great Alex Haley and how it came out years later that Alex Haley didn't write Roots. Alex Haley fabricated Roots from a white man who wrote a book entitled The African by the name of Harry Kolodner. That's all in court papers that came out. That Alex Haley Roots wasn't based on, what we thought Gambia, based on what Alex Haley had written. Then it came out that Alex Haley didn't write the autobiography of Malcolm X. That was written by a Jewish man by the name of Maury Fisher, who was the publisher of Reader's Digest. He was the editor of Reader's Digest and of Playboy magazine. But most people would thought that Alex Haley wrote that. So Alex Haley, even though he made millions of dollars, Alex Haley eventually had to pay out of court to Harry Kolodner, right? And so for those that say it happened 10 years ago, the book's been out for 10 years or 12 years, what difference does it make? So all you have to do when you tell a lie, all it takes is one person to stand up and tell the truth, and that lie begins to become unraveled, right? But this also goes to the integrity of Wes Moore, the character of Wes Moore, the transparency of Wes Moore, because rather than own up to it, as I've said to Mackenzie Frost and those when I did interviews with them at Fox 45, my nephews have taken responsibility for what they've done. My one older nephew, he died in prison. He had health problems. Wes Moore, my nephew, is still in prison. He's taking responsibility for what he's done. But Wes Moore, however, who concocted this along with his handlers and publishers, have not taken accountability to say, we want to apologize. And the reason why I say that, because if you remember years ago, it was a guy by the name, I think, James Fryer. He wrote a book, A Million Little Pieces. He went on the Oprah Winfrey show, and then it came out that he didn't write the book. And Oprah said, I've been hoodwinked, I've been bamboozled, right? So what? She said, I was duped, right? And she said this would never happen again. But this Wes Moore, this other Wes Moore, is proof that she's been duped, right? Because my sister was invited onto Oprah Winfrey show with Wes Moore's mother, to hold my sister Mary Moore up to say, here's a good mother and Wes Moore's mother, right? Here's the good Wes Moore. Now, here's the mother of this monster Wes Moore, that she was held up to be the dredge or the poster child of all the things that's wrong with Black mothers. And they were trying to portray her as a teenage mother, when, as I said, when my nephews committed this crime and participated in this crime, they were adults. They were 23 and 29. But Oprah didn't allow that information to get out. Wes Moore didn't allow that information to come out. It was to hold him up to say, I'm the good Wes Moore. I'm the Wes Moore you want to be your next door neighbor. But that other one over there, that's the monster. Now, my nephew, I think in prison, you don't see things as well as those of us who are not behind bars, per se. So my nephew, I think, clearly has been under a false belief that by letting Wes Moore write this book that it could lead to him getting a appeal and getting a new trial. Now that's what he really thinks. I mean, we had a conversation about this because I haven't been able to go see him in prison and hadn't talked to him in some years. So, but Wes Moore has been manipulative that when my oldest brother, who introduced me to you, he confronted Wes Moore about it, right? And Wes Moore made a phone call to prison officials to my nephew, and my nephew called his daughter, who then called my oldest brother and said, "Can you leave Wes Moore alone?" Now, after I appeared on Fox 45, I got a call through some sources that are friends with my nephew who's in prison, Wes Moore, to add. He said, "You could have messed things up for me." I said, "I'm not trying to mess things up for you, but you got to understand. This book has messed things up for the entire family. This is not about you. That's being selfish. I understand he's running on emotion, but that would not have happened had it not been for Wes Moore and his handlers trying to quiet down, right? See, they really thought that my family was just some ignorant old black folk in Baltimore, like the Henrietta Lacks family, that they could use us like that and didn't think that it would ever come a day, as I said, because this Baltimore, like you know me, people that are friends with Wes Moore, from Derek Chase to LaRon Finney. I grew up in Cherry with LaRon Finney. They all know me. So I think they really thought and didn't know who my nephew Wes Moore really was, right? So now they had to go back and try to change things up, where he had to say, "Okay, I'm not born in Baltimore. Baltimore is my home by choice." But that's not what you said in that book. That's not what you've been saying for the last 10 to 12 years. It was only until it came out 6 weeks ago that now you're saying Baltimore was my home by choice. When the reporter pressed him 5 weeks ago, he said, "Yeah, I grew up in West Baltimore." She said, "Well, what part of West Baltimore did you grow up in?" He said, "Waverly." Now everybody knows Waverly not in West Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
So this goes back to character. This goes back to all of those things that he claimed he learned in attending Valley Forge Military School, which is in Pennsylvania,
right,
and attending Oxford University, and attending Johns Hopkins and all these other prestigious schools, and then being a Rhodes Scholar, being a Freemason in the Prince Hall Lodge. I mean, you talk about, having some nobility here, having some, morals, having some integrity. So when given an opportunity to own up to it and say, "You're right, I owe that family an apology. I owe the citizens of Baltimore an apology," right? I owe first apologize to yourself for allowing yourself to be used that way, right? But they couldn't use you unless you work. It takes two, as they say, two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
So again, but he hasn't owned up to it. His mother hasn't owned up to it, because he said his father's name was Wes Moore Sr. He said, "Well, why don't you write a book about you and your dad? Why did you choose to use my nephew?" Because he wanted to give himself street cred and sweet cred and black sweet cred, SWEET. When you read the things he was embellishing in that book, talking about he laid in the bed at night hearing gunshots, you know what I mean, in East Baltimore. He saw crack deals going down. All this was to give himself street cred to, again, embellish these lies. But again, as I said, all it took was one truth to come out, and all of it began to unravel on Wes Moore. So they on the defense now.
They definitely on the defense. So you referenced what he was saying, I guess, in response to the reporter asking him questions. Right. So he said that we lived over in Waverly. So when I first got a chance to live full time in Baltimore, we lived in Waverly, and that's when he was. Oh, sorry, when he was in college. He said it was the first time when he was in college.
Yeah, but when you, yeah.
But he's been trying to push. He's been trying to push back on this, and also he said that he does not think that he let the narrative continue. I was clear in my book about where I was born, and also when I left on page 37, I talked about when I left to go to New York to stay with my grandparents. When I came back to Baltimore, it wasn't until when I was in college, Moore said. But when I came back, I spent most of my time in all the areas of Baltimore, including West Baltimore. So when I talked about the idea of comparing poverty and what poverty looks like, I was speaking as a collective. So he's trying to say that he was just speaking in general about.
Right. Yeah, but when you watch the interview on Oprah, to go back and watch the interview on Colbert, you go back and watch the interview he did with I think it was PBS up, and he brought the woman here, and they were walking on the Alameda and Kennedy, saying, "See, these are the blocks we grew up on, right? Go back and look at that." And the reason why I say that, because that's where my sister and my nephew lived after they left Cherry Hill. We lived on Luzerne. Then when my nephew was a little older, as adults, they lived right there on the Alameda. So he would not have known this had he talked to my sister or my nephew. So he clearly was trying to say he lived on the Alameda. And if you watch any of that videotape, you don't see nobody from the neighborhood walking up to him saying, "Hey man, that's Wes." You know what I mean? "What's up, boy?" You know what I mean? You know,
because that's how it would be.
If you and I were standing in the
went to
area
your old neighborhood,
you know, people gonna walk up. "That's my man, D. Williams, right there."
Yeah,
right? That's my man, Brother Muhammad. People be screaming out the window, rolling the window down.
Right,
But we always say only those with bad credit need cosigns, bro. So he didn't have a teacher, he didn't have a counselor, he didn't have a principal, he didn't have a crossing guard that could co-sign for him to say, "Yeah, we remember Wes Moore." You understand what I'm saying? Good or bad.
Yeah, definitely. I saw him on an interview on Bloomberg, I think in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I heard him say out of his mouth that he grew up blocks away from Wes Moore.
Yes.
So yeah, I heard him say it. So yeah, he's done the double dance with this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he's caught with this one, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so I guess it makes you say, what else is he lying about?
What else is he hiding? Right.
What else is he hiding?
Yeah. Well, it came out, of course, Mackenzie Frost, and I give her credit. You know, some people don't like Fox. I jokingly say, "Look, man, I grew up on Fox, and I know you grew up on Fox. Red Fox, Vivica Fox, Jamie Fox, Michael J. Fox, and of course, one of my favorite auto dealerships, man, was Hey Fox Chevrolet, right? I ain't got no problem with Fox." You know, people be tripping. Tell what we gonna do about Fox. You know, the only one worried about the Fox are the hounds. You know what I mean? I ain't got no problem with Fox.
Well, I on the other hand, I do not like the coverage of black politicians on Fox. Right. We've talked about the Mosbys many times in the studio, but they doing too much. Like, okay, yeah, they let's let it play out. But it's like they have an agenda that's just so personal that, so that's what I don't like. I like honest coverage, lay it out. It is what it is, right?
Right. Yes.
But and even if you're gonna do opinion pieces, and we do opinion stuff over here, and we got different things that, and that's fine. But lay it out as it is. But don't try to act like your personal attack is the actual news. It's their opinion. They don't like her. They don't like any of the black politicians. For whatever reason, Mary Bubala talked about every black mayor that there's been, in Baltimore. And
well, I mean, I gotta be honest. I talk about them too now.
I know.
I don't hold back.
And that's fine.
That's what we're supposed to do. And unfortunately, most of our black media end up having a romance and a bromance with the black politicians that we don't want to critique them, right? And so what ends up happening is the black media in this town, historically, from the Afro to Radio One to others, where they just say the topic is off limits, you can't bring it up. And if anybody brings it up, as I've had to, suffer, in terms of people attacking me for being on Fox 45. What I'm doing now, you're the only third black media person who said, "Let's come on and have conversation about it." I'm known in this town. I'm known in this region. I'm known in this country because of my friendship and relationship with the late, great Baba D. Gregory. So the black media have seen me on Fox, but the only one reached out to me is Coach Butch McAdams, who has a sports show, In and Out of Sports, and invited me on. And Carlton Douglas, who owns the funeral home service. And he, as I always jokingly say, tongue in cheek, anytime you got to depend on a man to spend more time talking to the dead than he do with a living to get your news, you're in bad shape. You know what I mean? But this is what's happening right now. That this is, again, what's happening. So this is why what you're doing is very important, because a lot of the black media, the Afro, Sean Yost knows this, but it's about relationships and friendships. So a lot of times they want to build a wall around them, and you're not helping them when you do that, because then eventually, when these court cases go to court, when these rulings come down, who are those that's losing? because the Mosbys are still gonna keep their they're gonna still keep their nuggets. They're gonna lose a lot. But just as we saw with Sheila Dixon, just as we saw with Kathy Pugh, just as we saw with Cheryl Glenn, just as we saw with Nat Oakes, you know what I mean? It's the black community, because the black community is believing in these people more than they're believing in themselves for the most part.
But I mean but it's almost like you say it in a way like these white folks are now believing in the MAGA movement, or you have elements of conservative media that rally behind their politicians. You know what I mean? So it's it happens. It don't only happen with us.
Right. No. And when it happens with them, hey, let it happen. That's all. You know what I mean? Because you better understand, when you're getting on the football field, when you're getting into politics, what you're really and truly up against. And I think many of our people don't really truly understand what they are up against. Politics, of course, is a contact sport. It's going to be a muddy sport, a bloody sport. You might get a concussion, but you better understand that, otherwise, like you going out on the football field with a hockey stick, or you go on the football field with a lacrosse stick. You better understand what you're getting into. Many of our people want to be the kings, but don't understand, like Mr. Willie Adams and others before him understood, the most important part is to be the king maker, not try to be the king,
Right.
And this is what's happening.
Very powerful. Very powerful. So there's been some question about his military record, and I think that happens with a lot of politicians. They'll start questioning the military record. Military record, I guess it is suspect. Definitely.
Say it was a bronze medal when he didn't have a bronze medal, right?
Right.
And normally, if you do something like that and you're in the military, you can be charged. I don't know if they can charge you now.
You're in big trouble, yeah.
Right, big trouble, right?
Definitely.
But why would you go to that length to do that? You know what I mean? Because this is to embellish. And when questioned about it and talked about, when Colbert and others said you bronze medal, he didn't cut him off and say no, correction. You understand? Wes Moore, he claimed he's very intelligent, the first Rhodes Scholar to graduate from Johns Hopkins, as he says, right? So he's very intelligent. He's very, intuitive. So he never cut any of them off to correct them, to say, no, I'm not. Let me be clear. I don't have a bronze medal. You know what I mean? And he chose not to do that because he wanted that, that lie to get out there, right? To embellish himself. And then the other part to that was to say that the family of the slain police officer had directed him to send proceeds from the book to a foundation, and
some kind of charity.
Right, to a charity. And the wife said that never happened. In fact, she said that no one should profit off of the death of her husband, because when he was killed, I think she had triplets, and she has 5 children now. At that time, I think she had 5 children. I think at that time she was pregnant with triplets. And so she's had to relive this now with a lot of this coming up. And this is what's happened with my sister, the mother of my nephew, Wes Moore. She's had to relive this. So it's caused her a lot of pain and discomfort as well, in terms of just now this coming back up, and the media reaching out to her. And of course, for this to come out now that the boy, Wes Moore lied, because he could have easily said, look, I'm not from Baltimore. I wasn't raised in Baltimore. I didn't get to Baltimore until I went to Johns Hopkins, but I just want to talk to you about your son. He could have just had some disclosure then. So he's been forced to do it now, and still, rather than own up to it, he tried to blame former Secretary of Education John King, who's running for governor, to say it came from John King's camp, rather than own up and say, well, let's look at what's in the dossier. Is it true or not? See, it's not about black or white, but it's about wrong or right is what it's about. And he hasn't owned up to that. So this goes to a deeper question, as your mom said, that she didn't know much about him. And I could go into him, how he's tied to the hedge fund companies, how he's tied to not the hedge fund alone, but the private equity firms, this Robin Hood Foundation, which Soros is the biggest contributor. The history of George Soros, as we talk about with Black Lives Matters and funding.
He's a banker.
Right. He's a banker. I mean, not just he's a globalist, right? And of course, Wes Moore he worked under Kurt Smoke when you do the research. So he could be a Lancer. Now, I don't know if you know the history about the Lancers with Kurt Smoke, but he could be a Lancer. He worked under Kurt Smoke. Then he worked under George W. Bush in the White House. Then he worked under Barack Obama. So he has the history to, of course, the politicians. So he was around a lot of them. Then he worked for Citigroup. And I don't know if you know the history of Citigroup, but when the 2008 housing crisis hit, Citigroup, along with Wells Fargo and so many others, and Wes Moore he's erased that out of his history. So you don't know.
He does
that he
not
was
talk
one of them.
about that.
Yeah, he don't want to talk about that. But they were the ones that created these subprime loans that
Yes.
basically stole a lot of the black wealth from black folk. So what they
Decimated us. Yeah.
so but he don't talk. He worked for Deutsche Bank and he worked for Citigroup, but he don't ever want to talk about that. That's where it's on black media to do their research. But when along comes someone such as myself, and I say, I think you really want to look at who is this guy Wes Moore, that they basically are running him like they did with Obama, where they said Obama was from Chicago, and Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. said there was no history of Obama being from Chicago. You know,
No,
but
it wasn't. It
right, he
wasn't.
had born in Chicago, but this is what they were doing. Or they tried to do it with Cory Booker, where Cory Booker was a Rhodes Scholar also, but he's tied to the hedge fund companies and up in New Jersey, but also in Connecticut. In fact, my late brother Glenn Ford from Black Agenda Report always called Cory Booker the hedge fund hooker. If you ever read any of Glenn Ford writings, he talked about Cory Booker was the hedge fund hooker because there's nothing he wouldn't do for the hedge fund boys, you know, because they was going to run him for president after Barack Obama. So it was going to be Cory Booker or it was going to be Kamala to see how the people basically accepted him. And the people didn't accept Cory Booker. They used Cory Booker against Sharp James, who was a longtime black mayor, successful black man in Newark, New Jersey. They tried to with Harold Ford, right? And it didn't work. Then they tried it with Cory Booker. Then they came with Barack Obama, then Cory Booker. And now it's my belief that that's what they want to do with Wes Moore. But they wanted to run him, as you said, for mayor. They wanted to run for Wes Moore. They wanted to run DeRay McKesson. But the people didn't accept DeRay McKesson. And Wes Moore wasn't as polished, right, at that time. So now I think they thought he's a little more polished.
He's got some polish. He got some polish on him now. I saw him speaking at a candidate forum. And, you know, I thought that he was going to be more relatable.
He's not. He's cold, he's cold. He
was not relatable.
Not at all, man. He's not at all.
And then after the candidate forum, I had a chance to talk with most of the candidates. Right. He left out the back door, side door.
Yeah. Why? When everybody else came out the front door, right? This was the one at Coppin.
Yes, it was at Coppin. Right out the side door.
You know why? Because he was running from Mackenzie Frost. Now it's interesting. Here's a man that said he was in the United States military, 82nd Airborne. Here's a man that said he went to Afghanistan, fought against the Taliban, the Pakistani, Blackistani, well, maybe not Blackistani, Pakistani, this Stani, and all the other Stani. Come back to America, get in the governor's race. You scared of a little. You even fought against Al Qaeda. You scared of little bitty El White over here in Baltimore. You running from Mackenzie Fraud. You scared of a white woman in a microphone, a camera in a microphone. That's the man that say he wants to be your governor. He said, "Come on now, that doesn't make sense."
Well, maybe he can hide in Annapolis like Larry Hogan does.
Yeah, he could. I doubt him. I don't think he'll be able to hide. But I don't think.
It'd be. I
don't think the citizens in the state of Maryland is going to elect not just terms of with everything that's happening in the state right now and since 2020 that they're going to look for somebody that's consistent right now, right? That keep the state stabilized. And I think they'll look at Francho and some others before they consider Wes Moore. Wes Moore may get some votes in Baltimore, may get some votes in Prince George's County, but them other 22 or 21 counties, I don't think so. In fact, I'm certain he won't. But,
you know, I think that's a good point. He is one of the leading candidates, though, on the Democratic side. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, well, that's because of, again, when you understand the Wall Street. See, he's a Wall Street candidate. He's not a Y'all Street candidate. He's a Wall Street candidate. You know, he didn't work his way up from the bottom. They bringing him from the top. This is the opposite of what we've seen from real Democratic candidates in the past. See, they're bringing him top down as opposed to bottom up. And this is what's happening. But they bought a lot of money from Wall Street. So they've been able to kind of, you know, put money here, money there at UMBC, money at Coppin with these EduCorps, you know, in Baltimore City Public Schools where they made his book required reading, right? So that means somebody some money somewhere.
And a lot of it.
Authors and
writers,
a lot of it.
Yeah.
And they haven't made their books required readings in school, right?
Right.
So why Wes Moore book? Why the other Wes Moore? Because Wes Moore was to be a brand. He was to be a hashtag, right? This is what he was supposed to be. It was like his big coming out. I'm the Wes Moore. Now his hashtag is I am Wes Moore. So, you know, this lets you see that as they did with Barack Hussein Obama, that I think it was their intention to do the same with Wes Moore, to use him and then eventually look at running him either for president or running him for possibly Congress in terms of Kwesi Mfume. So that may still be in their plans, but I think
it may be.
now
But
that this
I
has
don't
come
want.
out and they know I'm not going to be quiet about it, they will never offer me the opportunity to debate him because, as you said, he's not personable. Where I'm very
No,
personable.
He's definitely not.
He's like a Manchurian candidate for the most part.
If I ever saw one,
right.
he looked like it. Okay, he fit the mold of the Manchurian candidate for real. But I mean, when you talk about building up somebody, I mean, John F. Kennedy, they did him like that.
Right. Well, remember, Wes Moore went to the same elementary school in New York that the Kennedys attended, and former Secretary of the Treasury Robert Mnuchin. So he's like, wait a minute, how could you be from Baltimore and you went to this prestigious school that the Kennedys attended, right?
Yeah.
So this what you really got to find out who is his handlers that he could go to this school. They didn't say no other blacks that went to that school. So who was his handlers that he could go to that school, then go to Valley Forge Military Academy, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Pennsylvania. So he hasn't answered.
That's where he went to high. That's where he went to high school at.
Right. Yeah.
And so, with that being said, okay, Baltimore is going to decide who the governor is. I don't think
Baltimore will decide. I think it's going to be decided through Howard County, Montgomery County, and Anne Arundel County. Baltimore don't hold the power that we used to. We don't have the population, and even though we got 600,000, Baltimore. If there's no thrill, people came out Obama, right? Since then, you saw that president race with Hillary Clinton and Trump. Black folk didn't come out. Black men just wasn't fit. Black men wasn't feeling Hillary Clinton. Black men aren't really feeling Wes Moore. You know what I mean? But that's when people start doing these polls as they did with Hillary Clinton, they really made her think. Even Newsweek had already printed out 1,000,000-something copies of that Mrs. President book, right?
Yeah,
and they really was believing that. And so I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, because the way that they do polling, it can fool you. The sample size is very small. Yes. And that will just trick you into thinking something is bigger than what it really is.
Right.
So, your energy as far as your ears to the streets.
Right.
People not talking about Wes Moore like that?
No, people only, and you got certain little pockets in Baltimore where they talk about it. Certain little pockets in Prince George's County where they talking about it. But if the people knew Wes Moore was tied to Citigroup, which of course Prince George's County, the largest wealthiest county of black folk in the country, most of them people homes are still upside down and inside out thanks to Citigroup, the company that Wes Moore came from. So why would you take a man that did this to you and say you're going to reward him by voting for him as governor? But again, if you had real genuine black media having the necessary conversation we should be having, the conversation most black media is having is we should want to vote for him because he's black. That's it. Not saying John King ain't black. Not saying Rashawn Baker, who used to be the Prince George's County executive.
I like him.
Right? He's black.
Like him.
So you say, why are these politicians in Maryland endorsing Wes Moore? You're like, what is it? You can't say because he's the only black guy in the race because he's not.
Well, he's not. He's not the only black guy in the race. He might be the black guy in the race with the most money.
With the most money, right?
Yeah,
you got to find out what have they been promised or what have they been given.
But you know how it is. It turns so popular. Exactly. It turns to a popularity contest. If you look at Pennsylvania, if you look at Dr. Oz running, if you look at Donald Trump running, the Republican Party has understood that this is a popularity. This is some name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Oz being in the top 2 of a candidate for Senate is based off his name recognition.
Yeah, that's in Pennsylvania. A lot of them other states are people that you've never heard of.
Well, yes,
Trump might endorse, and they're winning right now.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But I mean, so we don't have a figure with that kind of visibility here. But Wes Moore is somebody that has been heavily promoted.
But I would say, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying he's been heavily promoted, and so I think people are gonna know Francho, but they're gonna look for name recognition, and they may know Tom Perez, but some of these other candidates, any of these other on the Democratic side, any of these other candidates stand out to you?
No, I mean you got John King, but John King was, he was the late Secretary of Education after Arnie Duncan. You know what I mean? So most people, when they say Secretary of Education, they think Arnie Duncan before they think John King. Now the interesting thing, John King and Wes Moore still sit on the board of the Robin Hood Foundation, which we call Robin the Hood Foundation. And if you really want to do some research, really research the Robin Hood Foundation, who they are and what they do.
He does claim that. He does.
Yeah, he claimed that he was the CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation.
Yeah,
all they do is push these social impact bonds. That's what these a lot of these foundations do. And all they do is come into the cities and the towns to say, okay, like this program that most of the black mayors are promoting right now, a guaranteed income where they're going to give certain number of people, might be 500, might be 200 people. They're going to give them $1,000 a month for the next 2 years. That's a social impact bond. Wall Street comes in and say, okay, we're going to give you this money. We're going to let you do this program. If the results don't come back 100%, you owe us a certain amount of money. If it come back 50%, we owe you a certain amount of money. So what they're doing is they're using these social engineer experiments on the citizens without the citizens knowing. And they're using these mayors to go into these contracts. And of course, to me, our lives should not be a social experiment for the mayors, for Wall Street, for, again, these hedge fund owners or these private equity firms.
You know, he talks about the work that he did with Robin Hood as being one of the examples of how his management style would be and how good of a captain he would be over the state.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But when they got in trouble, they went and got Wes Moore. Prior to that, there was no blacks on the board at Robin Hood Foundation. When you go back and do the research, they didn't put him there until I think it was either 2011 or 2012 or 2014. So he was only there for a short stint. But he was there to do damage control for Robin Hood, which they say their job is to end. They're the largest anti-poverty foundation in New York. You say you see all that poverty in New York? I thought y'all said y'all was ending poverty. You know what I mean? Right? So it's like, come on, stop. Stop. And so when you start, look at those who do report cards on these foundations, Robin Hood doesn't really, pass the smell test in terms of what they claim they're going to do and what they actually have done in New York City or in the state of New York as well.
So on the other side, I think that the leading candidate on the Republican side is probably Kelly Schultz.
Yeah, it'll be Schultz, or what's the other guy named? Cox, I think. Tim Cox.
Yeah,
right.
But so I think Schultz is probably the strongest of the two.
Cox was the one I think that did get the endorsement of former President Donald Trump.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, but he's a little
right.
He's a little far right.
Right.
I think, and probably too far right for Maryland.
Right.
Kelly Schultz endorsed by Larry Hogan.
Right.
And so, do you think that we're going to have another Republican governor here? Because it doesn't seem like nobody's strong enough to you.
It's a possibility, but I think that when we get through this primary, and I'm almost certain that I think it'll be Peter Franchot that's going to be the Democratic nominee, and I think that Franchot will most likely be the next governor in the state of Maryland.
Yeah. So if it's Franchot and Kelly Schultz, I think he's been around for a long time.
Yeah, he was a delegate, and remember, it was Franchot that took down, Governor Schaefer when he was Comptroller Schaefer, right?
Yeah.
So remember, when Franchot took down Schaefer, so the history of William Down Schaefer and all the big syndicates and mob bosses and Muldooms and B-Hoys that Schaefer was tied to. So I think that Franchot is not one to be taken lightly at all. But also in terms of talking about fiscal stability, talking about again guiding Maryland through some turbulent times, people are going to look at that and remember that those in the small towns and counties on the Eastern Shore, those up in the Western and Washington counties, right? They're gonna look at that.
He's very strong in those areas.
Right. Yeah. And that's where somebody like Wes Moore is going to struggle. Calvert County, Charles County, a lot of blacks. I'm down that way doing some work. A lot of blacks that have left D.C. and Prince George's County are down in Charles County, Calvert County, Eastern Shore. A lot of people going back to growing food and living off the land now. A lot of people going back to those areas, believe it or not.
And so in areas like that, you think a candidate like Franco's going to be stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Franco, I think in Montgomery County, I think that he'll win Montgomery County. It's going to be close, probably between him and Perez, because Perez has lived in Montgomery County. I don't know if you remember, Perez ran for the Senate when Cardin and Kwesi Mfume was running years ago, and they wouldn't let Perez participate in the debate out at MPT. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
And they had him arrested. You remember that? That's when he was wearing a toupee.
You escorted out. I don't know.
You escorted out. That's when he was wearing a toupee, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He threw away the toupee and then became chair of the DNC somehow at some point. So he's part of the party. But before, the party didn't want him to be a senator. So I just find it interesting. They didn't want him as a senator. They didn't want him running as a senatorial candidate, right, to participate in the debate. But now they want him to run for governor. So I just think it's interesting when you look at those dynamics. And some people, sometimes have a little amnesia and they don't remember that. So see how I brought that up, because I do remember that, that was Perez. And same thing happened with, I think, Rashawn Baker. He ran for governor a few years ago, right?
Yep, he did.
Right. They didn't want him. So, man, he's been touting Baltimore and talking about what he would do about crime in Baltimore, but at the same time, he didn't do anything to relieve the pain and suffering of the richest blacks in the country in Prince George's County with, again, the mortgage fraud. And I think that you cannot let any county executive, whether it's Alsabrook, whether it's Rashawn Baker, whether it's Jack Johnson, who was there, you can't let them off the hook, because, they got direct access to Obama when he was the president, direct access to President Trump afterwards, access to Biden. And they still haven't said, we got to do something to help many of these homeowners, because they still have not recovered from 2008. And then I think that that's something that America doesn't talk about. And the only way that we talk about it is we force them to talk about it, but not just talk about it. You got to do something about it. How can you go to Ukraine and give them aid, right? But you can't give those that are right in America, right there in Prince George's County, right, to help make them whole again. And that's important.
You pick any city in this country needs the money more than Ukraine needs the money.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't get baby formula, but they're giving out free crack. Think about that, right? Can't get free baby formula, but
they said he wasn't doing that.
Right? No. Go to the Washington Free Beacon, and actually on my page I have a picture. You go to any city health department. The city health departments are required to give it to those who want the free crack. And that's the interesting part, that when you talk about baby formula not being available, these health commissioners who was running around pushing the jab, right? You don't hear any of them saying anything about what are we going to do to help these mothers with infant children. But he's the same ones talking about a man shouldn't tell a woman what to do with her body. But right now we're saying, wait a minute, that ain't what happened when it came to Fauci. You let Fauci tell you what to do with your body, So now when your children and the babies can't get formula, you're not saying, wait a minute.
To me, we can't make formula stuff is ridiculous.
Yeah, you can make your own. That's the
ingredients.
Right.
We got these ingredients. We just make the formula.
When I was coming up and you was coming up, and I was a child of the 60s, we just used pet milk, carnation milk, and you just put a little Cairo in there, and you boiled your water, and it was half milk, half water.
Shake up the bottle,
shake up the bottle, don't want it to be too hot. So maybe we gotta have some YouTube platforms, social media platforms to show a dummy's guide on how to make milk, man, or beginner's guide. We won't call it
beginners. But see, the thing is that the powers that be don't want you to do that, because then they won't see that we don't need them. We don't need that.
We don't need them, right? That's part of the scamdemic, as we always talk about, right? That's the plandemic and the scamdemic, to keep you dependent on them, as opposed to, because the times may get to that point. They're telling you right now through their coded messages that they're going to have food shortages. They're going to have water shortages. So it's incumbent upon those of us that have these kind of platforms to warn our people, put away your water, but know how to purify your water. Put away some food, right? Put away some potatoes. Start gardening. They said during the pandemic, they said two things that blacks did the most was they went back to gardening. The second thing is blacks started purchasing more guns and going to the gun range.
And we need to do both of those things. Absolutely. Right. We need to do both of those things.
Yeah, so can't stop doing that. And that was the fastest growing gun owners in America, because people were calling the police and calling authority, and they weren't showing up. People were going to the supermarkets and they didn't have toilet tissue on the shelves. So people we may go back to doing, unconventional, but you have to do those in terms of desperate times, when people knew that meant stock up, put away you some food. If you need to have a 6-month supply, then you got to do that. You don't want to be left out there where you're at the mercy of those who have demonstrated that they really don't care about us. Because if you're in the Ukraine right now and you in some type of orphanage, they got plenty of formula. If you coming up from the Mexican border, they got plenty of formula in the DACA centers, right? In the holding centers for the children and the babies. But yet, supermarkets in here in the cities and in the counties don't have baby formula. So that's the dangerous part about that. When we talk about what's taking place inside of the country right now, even what we saw up in Buffalo, I could go deep into that because there's so many hidden messages in that. But they're telling the people your store is closed now. So if Tops is closed,
and the people there's no other supermarket around there.
Their food. Now, one of the things we eventually, and I'm hoping maybe we'll come back and talk about this, but that area is slated to be an opportunity zone in Buffalo. Is 18 opportunity zones in Buffalo. So when you see those things, I don't think it's a coincidence that it took place in that area. And you always stop and ask when you see phenomena or crisis like this, key bono, who benefits? Who's going to benefit from this, right? When you can sometimes the emotional part has to pass, and we got to try to rise above the emotions, because there's a lot of signs, symbols, numerology, gematria, and everything they've been telling about that story up there, Just when you think about the word Tops, first thing come to your mind, we coming up with some reefer, right? We heard Tops, you talking about top paper, right? So you think, I don't know no supermarkets named Tops. I know more.
Yeah, I had never heard of that either.
Tops, So there's a lot of things that went on up there that still hasn't been explained, right?
And it's not going to be explained.
Right. But that's what we got to have black media to go there and do our own independent people investigation on the ground and talk to the people. But in the meantime, between time, if the federal government got there and that supermarket's closed, how come they haven't said, well, we're going to open up some place for the people to get their food, right? Because if not, then, of course, then you can forget about saying 10 people were massacred. A whole lot more people going to be massacred because they don't have food. Or could that be a beta test for something bigger that they want to do this upcoming summer? So we have to be mindful of that when we're talking about and having these conversations about the water, about the food, and putting away water, putting away the food right now for a time that we may be moving into right now inside of this country.
Absolutely. I mean, so many nuggets that you dropped today. We definitely got to get together again and have another conversation. Those tuning in, Dame K and our brother Daren Muhammed here talking about a whole host of things. How can people follow what you're doing and hear State of the City and all of that?
Okay, well, I'm on every Saturday, WFBR. That's the world's first broadcasting radio station in Glen Burnie. They started out at the 5th Regiment Armory, believe it or not, and now they're all the way out in Glen Burnie.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, but 1590 every Saturday, 12 to 2. And then I stream a podcast on Instagram and on my Facebook at Daren Muhammed, Daren Muhammed, Muhammed. Instagram is Muhammad Duck Comet, Muhammed, and that's Duck Comet, Dacomet. And we do a stream on Thursday nights from 7 to 9 as well. So we'll be on tomorrow. I used to be on YouTube, but we eventually have to come back up on YouTube. They took my YouTube channel down, of course, at a time when they were banning any of those who dared to talk opposite of what was being told to the people around the pandemic, plandemic, scamdemic, and transdemic. And I always tell our people, question everything and question everyone is what we must do during these times, because we're at a time like we've never been before. And so we have to, again, question everything and question everyone. What we see on the news and what we hear as well. And tune in and support platforms, of course, as your platform in terms of, again, Fire, and of course, support you financially as well. And I think that's what's needed now more than ever. And this is why they've had to basically target platforms and programs like this, because people are not listening to some of the old news outlets, or I call them the fake news, as they've listened to before. Their ratings are coming down. You look at what's taking place in the universe with the lunar eclipse. All of that is just a sign on a macrocosm level of what's taking place on a microcosm level. Certain people that used to be in high places are going to be removed. Certain people that used to be on radio are going to be removed. Certain people used to be on television, they're going to be removed. It's like the Bible says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And as Minister Farrakhan once told us, that means new political and spiritual leadership, new civic and social leadership. And that means that the other ones have to die off. And I think that this is the time we're in right now, where there are those who are going to have to die off, so that we could see new, true leadership and those that really want to serve our people and serve humanity that's coming forward with these kind of platforms to share the information, not with a lot of foolishness. We can give you information and make you laugh, make you cry, make you testify, but not to dumb it down, not to dumb it down radio and dumb it down media, you know, and that's
there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, it's definitely plenty of that out there. So we definitely have to get together and talk more often. It's I love our conversations.
Thank you.
And the information that you have to share with people and all of that. So definitely this is not the end. This is just the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure's all mine, man. Make sure you give my greetings and love to your mom and to your dad. I met you through them. So just thank you, and to all your family. So just thank you, my brother. And thanks for this platform. And we talked to Sister Nikki, give her my greetings as well. Because I, of course, remember her just being there in studio and helping to make us, you know, in terms of the smooth transition to be able to do the program. So thank you very much, my brother.
Absolutely.
Go in peace. God bless you. And if I don't talk to you, of course, next week, it is Memorial Day. So we stop and memorialize all of our dead, not just in terms of those in uniform, but those out of uniform as well. So from those to the streets to the suites, my brother, right? So thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right.
Go in
Daren
peace.
Muhammed here on Fire TV. Thank you.
All right. Make sure you send me the link.
Will do.
All right, my brother.
All right.
Peace.
See you.